Good morning. Thank you all for coming to our Legislative Advocacy Day at the Capitol. Last year we didn't have it because of COVID. We are so grateful and honored that you all took the time, took some risk, and were absolutely the women warriors and the lead men warriors to fight for our causes. So thank you all for being here. I want to make a couple of introductions before we get started. I want to introduce Abdi Lopez, who is doing live streaming this event. Abdi is a member, one of our youngest members, I believe, at the League at Metro Phoenix. She's live streaming the event on Facebook, so we will have a recording that we will share. I also want to thank Tina. Where are you, Tina? Tina is our backup. Tina is from Northwest Maricopa. Both Abdi and Tina are just our amazing digital media people that have helped in numerous occasions. So I want to thank you all for that. I'd like to start first by making sure that you all know who the LWVAZ board members are who are here in attendance today. If you're an LWVAZ board member, please stand. Don't hide in the back, okay? You all know who you are, okay? Great, okay? Great. So, don't sit. Standing at the back, she's going to sit down and you'll know who she is starting with Susie Bowman from Northwest Maricopa County on the state board. Next, I'm going to call Beth Tracy from Metro Phoenix. Terry Farnetti behind you from Central Yavapai. Marianne Kenny from Northern Arizona. I believe we have covered, and of course you're going to hear from our president from Northwest Maricopa, from the state in just a minute. I want to ask all of you if you would raise your hand as to if you have become a member of this league, which is any one of our local leagues in the last year. Raise your hand. Now, all the people who didn't raise your hand, please stand up. Everyone who didn't raise your hand, please stand up. New members, meet the folks who've been doing this for quite some time. You really want to get to know them. We thank you so much, both our new members and the members who are who have been doing this for a long time. The league wouldn't be what it is without the work of these amazing, amazing league members. Couple of announcements that I would like you all to be aware of. To begin with, this event is brought to you by the League of Women Voters Advocacy Committee. I chair the committee, and as a co-chair is Gital Sear. Many of you know Gital Sear. That the spreadsheet is a tool by which to weaponize our activism. We love Gital to bits, and we want you to be aware that she is being careful and is therefore not joining us today. I also want you all to be aware that in the advocacy space we have numerous issue teams. LWVAZ advocacy can actually go to a place where you can sign up for any of these items that might interest you. I shared this with our new members. We need you. We need every single person. It's all hands on deck. You all know 2022 democracy is on the ballot, okay? So we need to all be fighting together and fiercely in order to protect democracy. The other item that I'd like you all to be aware of is that we will have in your program, at the very bottom of the program is a QR code for you to give us feedback on today's event. Be mindful that there was very little we can do to control some of our speakers and when they show up, but we know we're the lead, we know how to be flexible, right, everybody, and we know how to go with the flow. So we thank you for that. This morning at 10:20, we anticipate that Senator Leela Alston will be joining us, and we also anticipate that we will have Senator Martin Casada. Whether Senator Fian is able to join us or Representative Boulding depends on when they are able to cut loose from the African American Commission meeting this morning. So that's their conflicting challenge, if you will. Okay. I'd like to turn it over to Judy first. Judy Moore. I have to say a couple of things, because you all should be aware of this. For the first year, the league transitioned from a president serving for 2 years to a presidency that would be a president-elect 1 year and a president the next year. Terry Farnetti, who was on the nomination board, knows that it was a challenge for us to actually get someone to be willing to serve in that capacity. I agreed to serve as a president-elect, so I'll come on as a president. But that meant that we would have a year without a president, and lo and behold, our savior is Judy Moore. And I see this happen in the league again and again, where when we know there is a need, amazing, amazing women step up. I've been very fortunate to have the pleasure of working with Judy on this board for a little while, and I'm so delighted to be coming right after her with her guidance and her mentorship. So, Judy, come on, you're on.
Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see all of you. It's quite the ride once you get on the League of Women Voters wagon. And we're in one of the most sensitive and important parts of our year when the legislature is in session here in Arizona. It's been a year of Arizona being in the headlines nationally. And we see many challenges. Our mission, defend democracy and make democracy work. There's a place for everyone in the league. We encourage you to get involved, choose your committee, choose whatever issue. As soon as I'm not president anymore, I'm already on the water policy review committee, and already starting to learn a lot of new things. Also the convention, I want to mention that the National Convention is in Denver this summer, June 23rd through the 26th. Let everybody know you can attend, whether you're a voting delegate or not. You have to pay your own way. It's a hybrid, so you can attend in person or you can attend online. Also, the state annual meeting / council will be held on May 21st, and that too will be a hybrid meeting. So for those who are still have some concerns about, as we all do, the COVID issue, you'll have options. We encourage all of our members to come. Each local league will choose the voting delegates based on their membership numbers. And we will be having a business meeting. We'll hope to have a speaker and also workshops.
Thank you, Judy. As I buy some time, I thought I'll give you all, we have a lot of new members here, so I'd like to give you all an update on our lobbying work and how that is organized. Tell you a little bit about what to anticipate in terms of legislation and the legislation we're fighting, and some new information on how you can actually get more involved beyond RTS, okay, which is the request to speak. So for our brand new members, some from out of state that are joining us, Arizona has a very unique legislative body, legislative process, and legislative ability for the citizens to participate. So taking all three. If you're not aware, the legislature meets every year. It's a bicameral, there's 2 houses. The legislature has elected every 2 years, so every 2 years the circus begins, okay? And so be aware of some of those timelines. The legislature is in session right now. It is passing legislation through committees. Some are going through floor votes. The way it works in Arizona is legislation is introduced in one of the chambers, either the Senate or the House. Sometimes it's introduced in both. After it's introduced in one of the chambers, or both for that matter, then there's a period by which it is switched. So something introduced in the House, if it passes committee, passes the floor vote, goes to the Senate. If it passes the Senate, the floor vote goes to the House. We call that crossover week. So for us on the legislative analysis teams and the advocacy team, that's a week of a breather, though last year we didn't get that week of a breather. So you should be aware that that's actually how it works. It doesn't get to the governor's desk until it's passed by both houses, okay? So that's something to be aware of. All legislation that is started in the House starts with HB. That's how the bills are numbered. Legislation that starts at the Senate starts with SB, right? House bill, Senate bill. The other thing you should also be aware of is called resolutions. And there are two I'd like you to be aware of because they have a direct impact on how we as a league feel about ballot initiatives and the citizens' right to direct democracy. There are technically two ways in which laws are passed, legislature and the citizens. When citizens pass a law, what we do is we get what are known as ballot initiatives, and we either pass a law or stop a law. And we are in that, what I call a funny season where people are, submitting ballot initiatives. And the league, based on our positions, takes a stand on whether to support or oppose ballot initiatives. And we send out one set of information, and we'll do it again. There's another way in which voters get to decide, and that is by resolutions brought forth by the Senate or the House that essentially says, we want the voters to vote on this bill. Now, the difference between the way citizens bring forward legislation versus the legislators bringing forward is that when citizens bring forward legislation, they have to gather a significant number of signatures before it can even be on a ballot. On the other hand, legislators, if they pass it in the Senate and the House, it goes to the voters. They've done very little work to actually educate the voters, to mobilize the voters and support. They just put it to the voters. And if you have a lot of money, of course you can promote the initiative, whether it's accurate or inaccurate. So be aware of that. There will be ballot initiatives that are actually as a result of the resolutions brought forth. Okay? And we are watching those, and we will be speaking out, testifying, and we ask that you all pay attention. At this moment, while legislation is in progress, it is really critical for us to participate actively. And what I'd like very much for you all to be aware of is there are two ways that we want you to participate now. Well, three actually. Please, watch your spam, because that's probably where our calls to action are going if you haven't read them. Two, if you don't have a request to speak account, that little sheet I gave you, you can go in and try to figure out how to get an account, and we'll help you. Three, use the request to speak in our calls to action. We actually tell you what bills we as a league take a stand on, so we want you to do that. Four, this is the most important thing I'm going to ask you all to do. This is new. So those of you who've been doing RTSs, in the next call to action, you will get a list of all the legislators and their staffers. Start emailing them. So if we send you a note that says, email this legislature about this bill, do it. You may not, cannot, will not be saying, I'm a league member, but you will be saying, I'm Linda Marley, and I do not like this bill. We will give you the resources, so please be aware of that. I'm going to stop at this time because we are indeed so fortunate to have with us this morning our friend and a great supporter of the league, Senator Leela Alston. Senator Alston was a member of the league. We can count on Senator Alston's office at all times to give us the support we need, whether we want to be at the Capitol, whether we want to be at any event. And I do not think Senator Alston has ever missed any of our Legislative Day events. So we are indeed very, very honored to have Senator Alston here. Senator Alston, if you would come up, I would like very much to introduce you and then have you speak to us, please. Senator Alston is a longtime friend and ally to the League. She's an Arizona native. She began serving the citizens of Arizona in 1977 in our state legislature. She has a bachelor's degree from UA and U of A and a master's from ASU. She loves Arizona. She is equally devoted. She's an educator in Phoenix Union for 34 years. We love our educators. Instrumental in establishing the ASU West Campus. She was a member of the Phoenix Union High School District since 2008. She spearheaded the creation of Metro Tech. If you do not know what these special districts are, they are wonderful districts. They keep really our youth plugged into many of the trades where we are losing so much of the workforce. She's been 14 years in Democratic leadership. Her passion is education. Please join me in welcoming our longtime friend and ally, Senator Leela Alston.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to hold this down and try not to get wound up in the microphone cord. Good morning. It is my pleasure to be with you again this year. I know that Senator Rios was hoping to be here to greet you, and she had a conflict, so it is my pleasure to be her stand-in. I bring her greetings to you, and she is very sorry that she's not able to attend today. I came in kind of at the tail end of what needs to be done, and I think that the thing that we're most worried about throughout the state is our democracy. We are in dire trouble, in my opinion, when you look at what is going on in the Arizona legislature today. We've even made some national headlines as to how bad we are in this regard. A little hope came when Mr. Fillmore introduced an omnibus elections bill that had all the bad things we've been hearing about piecemeal in one bill. And Speaker Bowers, to his credit, assigned them to every single committee in the House. And that is unprecedented. It's not unusual to have a two committee assignment. Generally, that is for issues that require an appropriation, because they often go to a subject matter area and then also to appropriations. That's not unusual. If they assign it to two subject matter committees and appropriations, that's kind of the kiss of death. That's a signal that from the leadership that they don't want to do it. But 12 is unprecedented. I think I read that the most that had been assigned were 6 in Arizona's history. So this is a history-making event that Mr. Bowers, Speaker Bowers, is doing. He could have just not assigned it, and that happens frequently. If they don't like the bill, they just, we have a rule that it has to be, every bill has to be assigned, but it doesn't say when the bill has to be signed. So on the night that we're about to adjourn for the legislative session, the President, the Senate, or Speaker of the House goes through a whole list of bills and assigns them to Rules Committee. And that's just the kiss of death, because we're done, basically. And I had one bill that she figured would, and I put it in again this year, it calls for non-discrimination for gender identity and disabled people in the selection of textbooks and supplemental materials in public schools. Now, to me, as a school teacher, that seems pretty obvious and positive. Well, she thought it was so bad that she stuck it in her drawer last year until the last night of session. So I'm going to give her another chance. She did the right thing. But I think that we do need to look very, very carefully at all the elections bills, and I know that that's high on the agenda for the League of Women Voters. I've been a member for a number of years and an admirer for many more, and I've always appreciated your presence in the legislature. Years ago, there was this wonderful woman named, and you probably, some of you may know her, Sweet Blakesley, and then we did a thing for young girls out in, I think it was Chaparral High School a few years ago, and I met her daughter, and that was just such a nice thing. Now, I did come into the legislature in 1977 and served for 18 years. Then I was out for 16 and then came back. So today I am in my 30th year, but they are not, I haven't been here consistently. So anyway, people ask me, why do you keep doing it? And I guess I'm the eternal optimist, and I just don't want to let them win. And the budgeting process is really a mess. Those of you who do follow the appropriations have realized that the citizens are not invited or welcome to comment, and you're the subject matter experts. You're the folks that are in our communities and working with your neighbors and know what things are important and what things are not and what things need to be changed. And I'm really appalled. I made a little mini speech on the floor just yesterday or the day before about how the process, not the subject, but I have obviously problems with that as well. The kind of bills we're putting out in a budget or a budget that we're putting out. But the process has taken not only the public out of being able to see what's going on and having their input, but it's had members not able to be involved. And so what we've got now is a majority budget built behind closed doors. I'm on the Appropriations Committee. I have been for each of my 30 years. And we get a budget the day we're going to vote for it. I mean, literally, when we walk into the committee room to debate it, that's when we get the budget. And we did have a little victory, and this may improve things somewhat. I was a proud plaintiff in the bill that was found unconstitutional, and that certain items were dropped out because they were not budget related. It's called log rolling, and you may have seen that bill. We, as the president of the Phoenix Union High School District School Board, we were particularly concerned with the masking mandate that was in that bill and in Phoenix Union, we were the first district in the state to defy that order. And so I was glad to be a plaintiff in that suit, and glad that we were able to get some of those really bad things. We used to call them Christmas trees. You're putting on all the ornaments, but it was really quite a spectacle to see Senator Van move all these amendments onto the budget that were totally unrelated. So I think it will change things a bit in the future. And, we'll look forward to that. So we finished?
No, not at all, but I wanted to give our members a chance to speak, to ask questions. Please raise your hand. Marianne Penny is from our Northern Arizona League. She is one of our very active advocacy experts in our voting and elections.
Wonderful.
Marianne.
Yeah, I have the distinct pleasure of following these voting rights bills. And I have a question for you. I have seen the same topic show up multiple times in different bills by different legislators. Things like ballot images will be stuck in with a registration issue, or hand counting is stuck in with something else. And I'm wondering, do the legislatures not talk to each other? Is this an intentional way to, put things in multiple places and see if they can slip through? What's your sense on, I've never seen quite so much
Well,
stuff appearing in so many places.
I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, I think it's not any organized thing. I think that individual legislators have their own perspective on, a number of subjects. And because I know that one of the items or issues that I work on is affordable housing and homelessness and the Housing Trust Fund, but others in the legislature also have those same concerns. So oftentimes we're putting in similar or duplicate bills, and I think it is, particularly with COVID, we've had less opportunity to talk with each other, and particularly from one house to another. Over on the House side, they've had no mask. It really is what do they call it, a super spreader event. And so I tend to stay away from there. And I think, that just we've become somewhat siloed, even with our own caucus, because of the events. And one of the things we're seeing now is we have so many mid-session or midterm resignations. And so we've got all a bunch of new people in our caucus and in other caucuses who really have not worked together in the past. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is unusual because, in the first session of legislative term, and then you're more apt to be able to, go right to what needs to be done in the second. And I think we'll see that this session, we don't have that as much because of, as far as really going into that hotbed of Republicans who are unmasked.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Marianne. We have a question from Felice, who is one of our newer league members here in Arizona.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Senator, for being here. This is wonderful because I'm new to Arizona. Oh, I'll take this on.
Thank you. I don't hear very well either, and I didn't realize how bad that was until we all started wearing masks, how much I depended on lip reading, so thank you.
Anyway, I've been getting a lot of urgent messages from friends in the education field, and I know that that's, of course, your passion.
Right.
And so I'm going to read just one sentence, and I'm going to ask you to explain it and tell us what happened with it, if anything happened with it. It says here, it is imperative that the Arizona legislature pass the override K through 12, you're shaking your head, K through 12 spending cap before March 1st, or Arizona district schools will immediately face $1 billion in cuts.
Yes.
So catastrophic loss in education funding, and it has to happen with the school year beginning April 1st through June 30th, and a 2/3 vote is needed. Can you tell us about that and
I
where it is?
certainly can. Thank you for bringing that up. And Senator Casada, are you on education committee?
I'm not.
You're not, but Senator Casada is also a school board member in Pendergast Elementary District, and so we know this. Some monies have been designated to schools. we do have an old bill on the books that calls for a spending cap that is regulated by inflation and some other formula issues. And Senator Casada might be able to add more to this. And so even though the money's been designated, and it's not new money we're talking about, this is money that has been designated, we can't spend it. And so I'm trying to think of the numbers. In my legislative district, it's hundreds of millions of dollars that we will not be able to spend unless the legislature raises the cap, which they have done, I think, twice before, because it's just a dinosaur throwback that we need to get rid of it altogether. But it allows the majority members who don't like funding public schools, public district schools, an opportunity to hurt us, because this does not apply to charter schools, because we had no charter schools when that law was passed. It was passed by the voters many years ago. So I ran for state school superintendent and lost handling, by the way, in 1994, and I lost to Lisa Graham Keegan, and she was the big charter school person, and I was the anti-charter school person. You know, at that time, California had their charter school numbers limited to 16, and now we've got hundreds of them. And I unfortunately don't serve on the education committee. That would make way too much sense. So that's how it is. So I will step aside unless there's any additional questions and let you introduce Senator Casada.
Are you ready to stay on just a little bit, or do you?
I have another appointment at 10:30, I believe.
Okay, all right. If you can stay on.
No, it's 11.
Okay, all right, because there might be some more questions. So we do not want you tripping over the microphone. Senator Casada, thank you so much for joining us. Senator Casada, it's so great to have you here. Senator Casada and I have had the opportunity to share the stage and also to be active together on a number of issues, starting first with our redistricting discussion, where Senator Casada did an incredible presentation on why we should be concerned about our redistricting, not just the redistricting commission, but the way in which members were being selected to the body that decides who the candidates will be as commissioners, or potential commissioners. Senator Casada, if I'm in a rally, I expect him to be there. If I'm in a march, I expect him to be there. So, Senator Casada, I am so delighted that you are here. We have many new members here today who may not know who you are, and so I want to take a little bit time to introduce you to our members here. Senator Casada, this is our annual legislative day at the Capitol. Last year we landed up having to do it virtually, and this year we decided we need to be here to support our legislators and show a presence. Senator Casada is a Democratic member of the Arizona Senate, representing District 29 since 2015. If you would, when you speak, tell us a little bit about the geography, it would help. He's a member of the Pendergrass Elementary School District Governing Board, serving since 2011. He was previously a member of the Arizona House of Representatives from 2013 to 15. So he has seen both sides of this, the two chambers. Previously, he served as the research analyst and policy advisor to the Arizona State House Democratic Caucus. He currently serves as the Democratic Whip and ranking Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee. We have a lot of bills that we are testifying, both support, some of them, but mostly against. He's a member of the Pendergrass Elementary School District. He is also an attorney in private practice and has served his community in a number of different roles. I give you Senator Casada, hang on. put your belt on because we're in for a ride.
Thank you, Judy. I'm going to say it's such a great honor to work with Penny and the League of Women Voters. This is one of my favorite organizations because you guys know how to come in and kick butt. and to advocacy, you guys are top of the line. So thank you for all the work that you guys do. And I do have to say that it is like one of the biggest honors of my life to serve with Senator Alston. She is an icon in this state, and her knowledge and just brilliance is just amazing, and I just love her so much. She's one of just the best person you'll ever meet. So here in the legislature, a lot of things that happen that seem to not make sense at all, but they actually do make sense when you consider what they're trying to accomplish. And two perfect examples: an aggregate expenditure limit that you asked about, and the fact that the two elected school board members in the Senate don't serve on the education committee, right? So there's a lot of stuff like that happens here in the legislature. The aggregate expenditure limit, it's in our Constitution, in the Arizona Constitution, and it's a limit on how much money we're allowed to spend on education. Why would we have a limit at all on how much money we can spend on education? Only Arizona would have something like that, right? So it's a limit that it doesn't matter how much money the legislature gives, and so you're seeing this happen right now. The members of the legislature are saying, we've given you so much money, you should be happy and praising us for giving you all this money, yet there's this limit that doesn't allow them to actually spend it. So it's like, we're gonna give it to you, but not let you spend it. It's like giving your kid a gift for Christmas and not letting them open the gift. Right? Like, what good is that? It makes no sense. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that we deal with here. Thank you, Penny. I represent the people of Maryvale and Glendale in Legislative District 29. So just roughly, that's 43rd Avenue on the east, all the way up to Dylan Road on the west, roughly I-10 up to Asian School Road on the south, and Northern Avenue on the north. So West Valley District, it's a low-income district. There's a high percentage of immigrants, high percentage of monolingual Spanish speakers, actually the highest percentage of all the districts in the state. And the highest percentage of Latinos live in that district. It's a Voting Rights Act district, and it's one of the districts that got cut up in 3 or 4 different ways in this latest redistricting round. So you see why that kind of stuff happens. Like, everything seems to not make sense, but if you look at why they're trying to do this stuff, it actually does make sense. They just chopped my district up 4 different ways because it was a Voting Rights Act district, a district that consistently was able to elect not only Latino members, but Democratic members to the legislature. And that's the point of a Voting Rights Act district, is to allow those communities to elect candidates of their choice. Because through a number of laws, through a number of voting restrictions throughout history, that ability to elect candidates of your choice has been weakened over the years. And so we saw what they did once they took control of the Redistricting Commission. It's been a wild ride. I'm in my 8th and my final year as a senator here. I'm termed out after this year, so I will be moving from the legislature after this year. So this is my last session. And I can tell you it's been a wild ride, not only in my time as a legislator from the beginning, but even just this year. And it has gotten crazier and crazier every year, seeing how hyper-polarized we've become, how really nonsensical a lot of these proposals are becoming every single day, and how disconnected from reality a lot of the legislators are becoming. We're talking about auditing the election, conducting an audit of the election, and now trying to pass bills that further discount the ability of Arizonans to elect who they choose. This is craziness, and we're seeing that happen right now. And so it's getting worse and worse and worse here in Arizona. I've seen it go down that line and get worse every year. And I'm sure Senator Alston has seen it, the quality of debates decline as well. And so it's a scary time to be here. And this year has proved to be no different. And so I don't want to go on really long, but
Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Casada, I'm your constituent. I'm also from the Maryvale district. And I'm also co-chairing the Criminal Justice Issues team here with the League of Women Voters of the state. And I have one question and many more, but I'll ask you just one. There's a specific bill, HB 2021, if you recall from yesterday's session, that's like the felony murder bill, where it's a bit more penalizing if you are the cause of at some percentage, 1%, 100% of somebody's death 24 hours after you give like fentanyl to someone. So what happened yesterday? Like I see, at least if I understood correctly, that it passed in a unanimous vote, and we, the league, were against it.
Yeah, so that was a House bill. So I'm in the Senate, so I wasn't watching as closely, but I'm familiar with the issue. And for those of you that kind of don't know, felony murder, like it's obvious when you commit murder, right? If you actually take an action that takes somebody's life. Felony murder is when you don't do that, but you're involved in another action that results in the death of someone else. So you might be, you and 3 other people are robbing a bank, and somebody else shoots somebody and kills somebody. You, the person who didn't shoot anybody, can also get charged with felony murder. So this is kind of along those same lines. It's not a good law, in my opinion. I've actually run legislation to repeal the felony murder law, because I don't believe it's fair to charge somebody with basically giving them the death penalty for causing someone else's death, even though they didn't technically do it. They did something bad, don't get me wrong. They should be charged with that crime, but they shouldn't be sentenced to death if they didn't actually cause the death of somebody else. So this bill is kind of going along that same lines in terms of fentanyl, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's good that that you all, the league, was in opposition to this bill. I don't believe that is a good furtherance of or expansion of the felony murder rule. So it is kind of like a weedy issue. It gets kind of into the technicalities of what is a fair charge to somebody and what is a fair sentence for somebody. And for somebody who has admittedly done something wrong, like they've broken the law and it's resulted in the death of another person. But at the end of the day, you have to be fair about what types of sentences you give to people. And so my belief is that you have to be directly involved with the death of another person in order to be charged with the murder of that person. And so that's kind of where I stand with that issue.
And where do you see the rest of like your committee members standing? Or how can the league like further, because we thought we had made a good point in the House, right, but it was a unanimous pass.
Yeah, and so I think that's, so, and here's the problem with any kind of criminal justice, and you're chairing the Criminal Justice Committee, any kind of criminal justice legislation or changes in the law, you're talking to politicians who are running for re-election. Nobody wants to be painted as weak on crime, right? We all want to be tough on crime. And so it's always going to be hard for Republicans or Democrats, I'll be honest with you, to appear to be weak on crime. If I vote against expanding felony murder, it's very easy for my opponent to say, Casada wants to let murderers go free, right? That's what they're going to say about this. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's right. That's my belief. And I think that the arguments that you made in committee were good ones. And it's really up to those members. You have to continue those arguments and appeal to their nature of doing the right thing, doing what's right for all people, even the people who don't have a strong voice. And I believe that as legislators, we should be advocating for the people who don't have the strongest voice at the Capitol, right? Corporations, they got multiple lobbyists that come down here. People that are on death row, they don't have lobbyists. There's not like a lot, hey, I lobby for the people on death row. There's not people that do that. Yeah. There's not people that lobby for kids. There's not people that lobby for the elderly or special ed children. There's not people that advocate for them. So it's up to us to do the right thing for them. And so that's why I think you have to continue to appeal to the nature of those members to do the right thing in the United States.
Okay, and my last question is, what bills is the Senate Judiciary, or big bills, are coming up?
Yeah.
Ooh, so we were in Judiciary Committee right now this morning, so we took a break just now, so I ran over here during my break. I can tell you that today we're going to be dealing with an expansion of the standard ground law. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. We're actually, there's a proposal to expand that and basically allow for people to take the life of another person and not, and it's like the opposite of felony murder, and not be held accountable for it at all. Even though you literally kill somebody that comes on your property. So those are some of the bills, kind of things that we're dealing with. We dealt with another bill that would have, we just literally passed a bill out. I voted against it just half an hour ago, that would have taken away the ability for someone to sue the government And then if you sue the government, like let's say the government does you wrong in some way, and you file a lawsuit to protect your rights, usually the attorneys you hire get paid on a contingency fee basis. This bill would say that if you lose that lawsuit, like you're trying to defend your rights, but you unfortunately lose, that the defendant would then be able to take a percentage of the fees that you would have collected. So it basically takes away your right as a citizen who doesn't have the money to go to a lawyer and say, here's 20 grand, can you help me with this lawsuit? Like you usually have no money, so you go to a lawyer and say, can you do this for me for free at first? And then if we win, you get a percentage of whatever. That's how that works. It's a poor people's way of filing lawsuits, hiring lawyers on contingency. This would basically take away that option. So like lots of ways that they're trying to use little rules to take away the ability of everyday people like you and I to seek justice in our community. That's a basic way to get started. But those are the things we're dealing with right now.
Thank you.
Mary Beth?
On the, going back to the education cap, I should have read more about it, but if it's a part of the Constitution, how do you get it? How do you get rid of it? Can you do it legislatively if it's part of the Constitution, or does it have to go to a vote?
Yeah, great, excellent question. Yes, so there's a way, the way it's written in the Constitution, the legislature can override it for 1 year,
Only 1 year.
So we're allowed to do that. So that's why we haven't done it yet. But that's why there's a push for us to override it for 1 year.
And you typically do it every year?
No, we've only had to do it like twice before. We've never gotten to that point.
Oh, okay.
But we could amend the Constitution and just get rid of that cap altogether, which is what I think we should do. And that would require us as a legislature to send that to the voters, and the voters would have to vote on that. I think if this was sent to the voters, it would pass easily. I mean, why is there a cap on? It just makes no sense. So they don't want to do that, but I think it's what we should do.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Casada, on that point, before Senator Alston came in, I talked about two ways in which we can pass, citizens can pass laws. One is where the citizen initiates, and the second is the legislature. So this is related to that concept, my question, okay? Question is this, Senator Casada. One, what is the appetite in this legislature to bring forward a resolution that could be put in front of the voters? And how might the league do some lifting to, push that? Because we haven't actually done that kind of work yet, but it might be something for us to consider, and even other education groups. And part two is, is there any movement on the grassroots side to bring forward a change in the Constitution amendment?
Yeah, a great question. So the legislature, we can put anything before the voters, right? We just have to pass by a majority vote any law that would then get put on the ballot, and it would be a proposition, right? That's called the referendum. It's a constitutional thing that allows us to put something before the voters. We could do that. We have a bill. Senator Christine Marsh out of District 28 sponsored a bill that would actually do that, send that issue to the voters, so you all could vote on whether we can get rid of that aggregate expenditure limit. There has been no movement on that whatsoever. They refused to give it a hearing here in the Senate. And I believe that there's another representative, I can't remember which one, but another rep has it in the House as well. And that hasn't gotten any movement over there. So the league could definitely pressure the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and the chairs of the education committees to give that bill a hearing. And that's something I think you could definitely do. The other way to vote on this as the people is to do an initiative measure, which is when the people have to actually go out and collect signatures themselves. And if you get enough of those signatures, it will become a proposition. It goes on the ballot. I don't know of any effort to do that yet, but it may be coming.
Yeah. Senator Casada, on that point, I want to come back to the point about the citizens, bringing forward an initiative, or the legislature bringing forward the initiative. What do you see as, it seems that part of the reason is that are there wedge opportunities, if you will, to identify legislators who are in school districts that are impacted by this? I think we haven't quite gone that route, to get to the legislators.
Yeah, that's a great point as well, and I can tell you that literally every legislator represents a school district that will be impacted, and some of them, actually the Republican members, they represent the districts that will get impacted the most because they have so much more money, so much more larger budgets than the districts. And like my district, the Pendergrass district, we would have an $8.8 million cut from our budget, which would literally mean we'd have to lay off courses, we'd have to stop all capital projects. But think about the Scottsdale Unified School District, the Mason Unified School District, there's in the tens of millions of dollars that they would lose. So yeah, every legislator is impacted, and there is a list of every school district. I can send it to you.
Yeah, if you send it, I think that could be part of our after work that we do to, as part of our education. Senator Casada, before we let you go back to the judiciary hearing, we want to talk a little bit about the fighting back against these really nonsensical bills that are either the ones that worry us. Some of us, a great deal more, are the ones that are criminalizing, you know, the work of really friends, neighbors, as co-workers, okay? How do we push back on that? Help us understand the power of our voice and how to leverage it with the legislature. You know, letters to editors and all are fine, but we've got to get to the legislators to kind of, you know, get it. So please speak about that.
No, exactly. And I can tell you right now, there's a number, actually Arizona leads the nation in the number of elections bills that have been introduced that would basically suppress the vote in the state and do things like criminalize poll workers. We've got we're leading the nation, which is not a good thing. But I can tell you that in each of those committees right now, the only ones getting up and testifying are the people that support this. And these are people that are I hate to say it, but they're disconnected from reality. They truly believe that this election was stolen. So we need to counter that. And so those legislators need to hear from you all that you trust our election system. No election system is perfect, but our election system is actually really, really good in Arizona. And our local, and these are both Democrats and Republicans that serves our county recorders across the state of Arizona. They all do excellent, excellent work. They need to hear from you that you trust with the work that they do, and that you trust the results of these elections. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but at the end of the day, you know that these elections are being conducted fairly. And if what they're saying is true, then you know, if Joe Biden had won, then why wouldn't we have one in LD6? You know, why wouldn't we have one in LD20 and some of these other very competitive legislative districts? Why wouldn't we have also taken control of the legislature? That would have helped us a lot more in Arizona than, honestly, than what Joe Biden would have. So it doesn't make sense, this theory that they are putting out there. And they need to hear from you that you know that this is nonsense. And they need to hear that from you guys.
Thank you, Senator Casada. Before you run away back to your hearing, I want to make these comments. I'm trying not to trip our speakers. I have too many hearings. I was going down this path before Senator Alston came in, and I want to urge you all to be thinking about this, okay? We need everybody to RTS when we call you to RTS. We also need you to do those emails to the staffers in those committees, to the legislators of those committees. They need to hear from us. And the third point I want to make, Senator Casada, you should hear this. Many groups have chosen not to be present at the Capitol testifying. We as a league stood up and said, no, we need to be there. And not everybody supports that decision, but we need to have a presence, because what we need to understand is our voices and the legislators who are fighting against some of these really bad bills, they need to hear from us in that committee. A little bit of a hint, when I send you all the list, send an email with your issues to the members of the committee that you know are fighting on the right side, if you will, and they will bring it forward at the committee hearing. You can also make a request and say, I want this entered in the public record if you do not want to be there. Because what you should be aware of is that ultimately the governor has to sign. We've got many times that we can be back here fighting, now at committee, second time at committee, and then when it goes to the governor, if it does, We need to do an all-push. Democracy is on the ballot, and we're fighting. So I do want to say that to you. That's why we're there, because we know we need to have a presence. Thank you, Senator Casada, for joining us. Perfect timing for us to take a short break. So if you want to take a quick restroom break, you get, and ladies, try to do it fast, 5 minutes, okay? And then we're going to start back the program. Can you pause? Are you able to pause? No? Okay. All right, you can take some time.
Okay.
Folks, we're going to get started, so please take your seat.
Yeah. You know what I did? I just connected to my cellular. I turned off my Wi-Fi.
Whatever this is, the QR code like this, and then they hand them out, like it's like so they can show it. And like for people, she registered to go out
Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, I mean, the governor's time is, it's for the charge. That's I mean, that's one of his priorities. Baby was one of my favorites. That's the great, my friends.
And it's in part because the speakers have so much interaction, you know, so we just really collaborate with them, you know, because they're amazing, you know, and we're looking to do a lot more. We have some stories individuals that we want to bring in. We already presented kind of like the legislative side, but we also want to present the other side, which is the community side. So that'll be a big thing. Yeah, thank you. We're good. Yeah, we're good.
League members, could you please take your seat so that we can get the program going? I'd really appreciate if everybody could take their seat. We're going to go live here again. We're going to switch the program a little bit. We had planned on having our education speaker come in at the end, but based on our interest in terms of transitioning, I'm going to ask our leader from the School Board Association, Chris Cornerman, to actually address us first, and then we will talk about water, very important thing, life-giving fluid for all of us. So Terry Goddard will join after that. You can see there's some very serious issues in education that we are concerned about, okay? One is funding. The second is the continued attack on the teacher's ability to give all our students a well-rounded education, where they're informed unbiasedly on our history, our background, the history of the country, the history of the world, and more importantly, where science is not impacted by political partisanship and the teaching of science. We also care as a league, you all know, in how charter schools are managed and maintained. That's part of our education position. In education, and this is really a much broader concept, and that is the concept of we want peace at the polls, which means that we want to be ensure that elections and poll workers do not have to fear for their lives. We want to be sure that elected officials don't have to fear for their lives. We want to be sure that volunteer school board members who are trying to do the right thing for our students and the children in our community don't have to fear for their lives. So I would like you all to be thinking as we talk to Chris about the School Board Association, what are the school boards facing, and any other issues related to education that he is going to illuminate for us. Chris, we look forward to hearing from you. This is Chris Cornerman. He is the president of the School Board Association. A little background on the School Board Association would be very appreciated too.
Thank you, Penny. I have to correct you one though. Thank you for my promotion, but I am not the president of the School Boards Association. I am the director of government relations for the Arizona School Boards Association. Our elected president is currently Ms. Monica Trejo from Tempe Elementary School District. The School Boards Association is a voluntary nonprofit association of school boards. Every school district in the state is a member except for 2. And those districts join the association, and then we provide services to them, such as leadership development training, open meeting law training, policy services, and general consultation, to include advocacy for public education, which is my job. But we are run by a volunteer board of directors. They are all elected school board members, and they run for election by their peer districts, and so that's how we are governed. Because of that, we have undergone and are undergoing a tremendous period of what we'll call strained relationships with our friends at the legislature. And so it really started out, I think probably you're all familiar, because we're all, still wearing the face masks, which I appreciate. I took mine off to talk to you, because I think they're probably rough. But we're all still doing it, right? And about the issue of COVID mitigation protocols, should schools be open, should schools be closed, should students wear masks, should students not wear masks. And we have a situation where a number of other grievances with public schools have been rolled into a tiny little political package to basically advance and organize a particular worldview in the political space. And so what I mean by that is, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily wrong, I just think that it's interesting. And so if I'm concerned about, winning an election, say in 2024, and I realize that when my party lost the last election, they lost heartily and handily among suburban women in particular, what might I do to engage those people in the electoral process? Well, I might find an institution that is important in the community that particular people in the suburbs care about, and start to agitate around issues there, so that I can organize people and use them later. For example, right? And so we have seen, and we've seen some issues, bubbling up for a long time. The issue, the accusation that public schools are too liberal, or that unions are a problem, or that school districts aren't responsive to constituents, that kind of stuff. Those have been around, but the particular animating issues of COVID mitigation protocol, the politicization of that, and what I refer to as quote-unquote critical race theory, have been the 2 primary animating issues that have driven a lot of this politicization of the school system. And it's an issue for us, because at the end of the day, I should say this, and then when we have what we have here at the legislature, which is a number of different pieces of legislation targeting school boards and school districts and their ability to govern, as casting the school board and the school district as anti-parent. We're hiding things from parents. We don't want parents to have control over their children's upbringing. You hear a lot, the children belong to me, not the state, that kind of stuff. They're not your kids, they're my kids. And school boards have a tendency to refer to, and schools and teachers have a tendency to refer to our students as in part of the community that we are responsible for, not our students as in we own them, not you. And so, but that assumes, it's a very large assumption, about that parents as an entity are a monolith that all want the same thing. And I'm here to tell you that anybody who sat on a school board knows for a fact that that is not the case. Because on both sides, they did. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was like, how dare you smother my child in a face mask that can't breathe, or you're killing my child by not requiring everybody to wear a face mask. There wasn't a whole lot of middle ground there, right? And so that's just patently false. But it's the narrative that's been chosen to advance this idea that schools are the bad guys, right? That schools are somehow constructed in a way that will undermine the values of most parents and, indoctrinate children into some sort of leftist ideology that benefits the professional class that controls the education system, right? I mean, that's really it. And so, we're fighting against that. And that's all an overlay of the real problems that exist, which are incredibly real and incredibly concrete. That being, we have a teacher retention crisis in the state of Arizona. There are 2,000, at the beginning of the year, there should be more data coming in soon, 2,000 empty slots for fully certified teachers in the state of Arizona at the beginning of the school year. And that was among all the districts that responded, which wasn't even all the districts of the state. That was like 175 districts, we have 230. So, and what we're doing to fill those is a couple of things. We're increasing class size. We're taking away planning periods from teachers. We're saying, I know you're supposed to have 40 minutes off, but, I'm sorry, we can't give that to you. You have to go cover this class because, we got a teacher out today, or we just aren't going to cover it, or whatever. So, or we have administrators going into classrooms to sub periods to make sure that those teachers get those preps. Or on days when they're sick, all hands on deck. Everybody teaches 7 periods, including the principal, to make sure that every kid has a teacher. The other thing we're doing, long-term subs, when you can find them. Emergency subs. This is a situation where the State Board of Education just increased the amount of days that emergency subs can work in the classroom because we don't have enough substitute teachers to take care of all the absences when certified teachers are out, right? I mean, forget having a personal day or taking your pay time off because you need to go to professional development or whatever. We're just talking about teachers who are either sick or just dumb, right? So, that's an issue. And then we have our normal issues of, capital facilities, things like that. Because remember that we still, in the state of Arizona, do not have a functional building renewal capital formula that funds school facilities. We have new school facilities that's operating fairly decently now. So the governors and the legislature have taken care of that over the past couple of years. But we still have a situation where there's a specified pot of money for schools to apply to get funding to repair their facilities. And when that money is exhausted, it's exhausted for the year. That's it. So, if I have an air conditioner that's out, and the other thing is, it's got to be out. It's not like this air conditioner is 30 years old, we need to replace it before it goes out. It's no, it needs to be broken, not working, then we'll come and replace it. So that's the kind of situation that we're in. The roof needs to be not it needs to be replaced pretty soon, but it's failing today, then we'll replace it, right? That's where we're at. And so what we've done as a state, the Arizona School Board Association gets a bad rap at the legislature because we like to sue the state all the time. Sue the state council. So we joined in Roosevelt and Bishop in the 90s. We sued the state. They won. That created the School Facilities Board and the building renewal formula. The state then spent a whole bunch of money, $1 billion, then proceeded, in our view, to walk away from that investment over the next 20 years, leading us to where we are now. And we said, hey, wait a minute, you have a constitutional obligation to fulfill this, to do this. The court said so. It's not even us saying it anymore. There's a case that says this. You're not doing it. So we sued them again. And we're still waiting for that one. And then last year, we at the end of the legislative session, then when they crammed in, some critical race theory stuff and some mass stuff into the budget bills, we said, wait a minute, that's not the budget. We have a single subject rule in Arizona. You can't do that. And we sued them, and we won. And now they're really mad because, they're back with all the bills that, we sued them at. They got struck down, critical race theory, House Bill 2112, the mask mandates. They're all back, and that's fine. It's bad policy, but that's the way that it should be. They should have a bill about, curriculum, critical race theory, whatever you want to call it, and they should run that bill, and it should pass or fail on its own merits. And so, You know, just a quick rundown, because I know you probably have questions and I don't want to talk to you for forever. I'm really good at that. But we, obviously, we advocate for these issues. The state has about $1 billion revenue surplus this year. We would like to see that used for increases in the base level and or capital funding. A couple of our proposals are that we need to do a couple of things. We need to, like I already mentioned, capital funding. We also need to increase our formula funding for special education, both at the state and federal level. So I don't know if you know, but the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is a federal law that when it was passed in 1970 something, I don't even know, 73 I think, had a promise. It wasn't a guarantee, but the promise of IDEA was that the federal government would cover 40% of the cost of educating a student with special needs with disabilities, and the state would cover the extra 60%. Anybody want to guess where we're at today? I'll give you a hint. It's not 40%. 10%. It's about 14. Yeah. So, and that's just a function of the appropriation of Congress, right? So schools are making that gap up. And the thing about special education, and it's hard to talk about, but we'll talk about it here because we're all, I think, interested parties. We never want to say that students with disabilities are taking away from students in a regular education program. However, so I'll say this, it is true that, what is true is that public school districts have a fundamental federal obligation to meet the needs of students with disabilities. They are the only population of students who are guaranteed services as soon as they walk in the door. I don't care if you have, $200 and that student walks in and says they need $300 for the services, guess what? You got a problem on your hands, right? That is the obligation of the district school system, and it's the only system that has that obligation. I mean, other systems, charter system, private system, they have a non-discrimination general responsibility, but the federal law places very specific responsibilities on the district school that does not exist anywhere else. You are entitled to services by virtue of living within the boundaries of the district where you live, period, end of story. So when you have a situation where students, with disabilities are in sort of critical mass, and this is a problem with open enrollment in a sense. So I'm Washington Elementary School District, is a good example. They have made a policy choice that they're going to invest in special education. And so they're well regarded as a special education district. They do really good things. So if I'm a district, if I'm a parent in another district, I say, oh, you know what? I hear Washington Elementary does really good stuff about special ed. I'm going to go over there, and I'm going to enroll my kid. And they say, okay, great. But now and I get funding for that student, but we all know that the amount, as we just mentioned, the amount that you get for the student is not commensurate with the level of services. And so now I am adding students to my special education program, and I'm serving them. And then I'm using more resources than I'm getting. It doesn't take a genius to figure out where that goes the longer it goes on, right? And eventually, Washington Elementary can't sustain its own investment in special education. And so when we talk about open enrollment, people like say, oh, school districts are discriminating against students based on their disability. It's like, because they don't want to open enroll students. Well, we have a mandatory staff ratios we have to maintain. And if we can't maintain them, we can't enroll the student. And they say, well, students are entitled to services. And like, they are, at their home district. The federal law says that's where they're supposed to be served. Everything else is extra, right? But I'll be the first to admit that special education is incredibly sensitive to quality of administration and all kinds of things. It's not a perfect system, right? By any means. But we have to figure out how we serve those students in the places where they're entitled to services, as opposed to trying to shuffle them around and then being like, oh, you guys just don't want to have the responsibility, right? Because we all have responsibilities we all have primary responsibilities to the students who live within our district. Second, we talked about capital already. And the third thing is what we call the opportunity way over the poverty way, right? And so this is the idea that, again, it's an equity question, an equity in the sense that all students deserve access to be able to succeed to the standard, right? Students with special, not special needs, students with ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, childhood trauma, just living in poverty is difficult. I don't know if you've ever done it. I never have, so I'm the first to tell you that all of my experience with poverty is anecdotal, right? But I hear it's terrible. I hear it's not recommended, right? So, like, these things add up, and we need supports in the school system, whether that's counselors, social workers, just extra time for teachers to collaborate with their peers to figure out how we serve students better, and not have them cover, extra classes. We can do this by advocating for extra funding based on the number of students who are living in poverty in your district, low SES, we call it, low socioeconomic status. And it can actually even save the taxpayers money, because if we do this right, it can take the place of and even grow bigger than DSEC funding, which is currently paid for by property taxpayers in the district as extra, right? Big source of a problem for commercial properties. They hate it. Our friends at Asher are always down there saying, it's terrible, it's inequitable, blah, 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 right? We can get rid of it. All we have to do is make a formula that makes sense, right? Pretty simple. All we have to do. No worries, right? Done. So what makes these kinds of things difficult? Well, we first have to fight through the conversation about the V word. Vouchers. Yeah. So empowerment scholarship counts. Don't you dare call it a voucher. Empowerment scholarship. So I mean, that is what they're called, and I'd say, but they're fundamentally, in our view, diverting public dollars to private and religious education. We call that a voucher. The issue there, I mean, we heard it in big testimony on Tuesday, about this. We can have both. I don't know why we're not here against public schools. We can have both. And you know what? They're right. We can have both, but we don't. Right? We have in Arizona 3 separate education systems under one umbrella. We have a district system, we have a charter system, and we have an ESA system, right? And we like to think of them all for political purposes in the state as part of one big happy public education family. And they could be, if the legislature was willing to recognize that each one has separate and distinct costs that they have an obligation to fund all of. Instead, what we get is, we spend $7 billion in this state on public education. What are you guys complaining about? Well, I'm here to tell you that if you spend $7 billion on public education and we have 2,000 teacher vacancies, guess what I'm going to tell you? $7 billion, not enough money. Sorry. Don't know what to tell you about that. We can find efficiencies in the system. Okay, cool. Check this out. Arizona's administrative spending is about 10%, right? $800 per student, roughly, statewide. It's 10%. That means 90% of the funding in the school goes to salaries and benefits for teachers, teachers' aides, bus drivers, staff, janitors, sanitorial engineers, whatever you want to call them, classified staff, right? Good solid folk to keep the schools clean, right? Maintenance, utilities, I mean, everything, right? And you could get rid of that 10%. You could get $890 per student into the classroom. Sounds great, right? Well, who's going to process your payroll? Who's going to take care of your IT system? Who's going to procure all the stuff you need to procure? Who's going to, the list goes on, right? That administration, same thing in state government, by the way. People say, bureaucracy, so top heavy. Do you know that all of state government, except for, and I'm off on a little tangent here, so I'll wrap up here in a second. But did you know that all of state government here takes, K-12 education, universities, corrections, access, the Department of Health Services? I think that's right, that's 5. Guess how much of the state budget that is? 90%. All the rest of it, Department of Fire and Quality, DPS, insurance, name an agency, 10%. You could get rid of everything except for those 5, and you save a whopping 10%. You wouldn't license nurses anymore. You wouldn't license doctors anymore. You wouldn't license physicians anymore. You wouldn't, funeral embalmers, examiners, cosmetologists, barbers, architects, you name it, 10%. So our fundamental expenses in Arizona are not out of line. Prisons, education, and healthcare. That's like every state. It's not like it's not like we're burning money over here, right? So anyway, that's sort of the lay of the land for you. I will talk real quick. I'll talk real quick about equity. And here's the thing about equity and sort of critical race theory. We catch a lot of heat right now at ASBA as being an as being very pro-equity, right? We have equity as a big component of us, and we don't apologize for it. It's true, it is. Educational equity is important, but here's what it is from our perspective. We think that we have an obligation to challenge school board members to think about these issues and how they might address them in their own school districts. That's it. I mean, we have a whole curriculum around that, like board member curriculum, not student curriculum. We have a whole curriculum around that for board members about how to sort of think about these issues, how to use data to look at the systems you have in place and things like that. That includes discipline. That includes lunches. That includes access to different services, all kinds of stuff. What it does not include is teaching students about the 1619 project or whatever, right? Because our fundamental principle at ASBA, and what leads us to oppose these things like the critical race theory bill or whatever, is that no one, and I mean no one, should determine what is taught in the schools except for the State Board of Education through the standards and a locally elected school district governing board through the adoption of curriculum. That's it. That's the entire position. There's nothing else to it, right? So yeah, school districts sometimes, make mistakes. They get, Prescott, they caught a lot of heat because some teacher found his worksheet online from like Canada or something. They didn't pay attention. So it had all kinds of questions on it about like leftist socialism parties and things like that, which they have in Canada. There's a whole parliamentary thing, big left, big right. And they used it in the classroom. That was dumb. I totally agree with that. That was dumb. But guess who handled it? The superintendent of the school district. Done. Over with. Never to be seen again. Right? That's how it's supposed to work. And so those types of things will happen from time to time, but at the end of the day, it'll work. And so I think that when we talk about equity and things like that, we have to be very clear about who's responsible for what. And it's very easy to dump a lot of stuff into that bucket because there's a lot of grievance in the country about the general state of race relations and all kinds of things. And all of that gets pulled into the schools because we have a captive audience. We got kids there and we're teaching them stuff. And everybody has an opinion about what the right stuff is, which is why it's very important to tie the values of the community to what's going on in the classroom. And how you do that is through the school board. End of story. So all the stuff you hear about us, like promoting all this stuff, because we got people in our events and everything, and we were saying all kinds of weird stuff. We do have people at our events sometimes that say provocative things, but it's just speech. Nowhere in the content is there like, and now, by virtue of your membership at ASBA, go back to your district and make all of this happen. Because that's not what we do. So I'll leave you with that. Happy to take questions. Penny, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Absolutely.
I have a question before we get the group. They're all ready to go.
Yeah.
And this is bringing back to vouchers.
Yes.
And we talked about, sure, you could fund everything, but are the public education that's not funding public education? What is the general polling?
Well, generally speaking, I mean, the biggest poll we had was Proposition 305, and that went down 2-1, 66 to 33. But generally speaking, we ask them, whenever we do a poll, most of it comes back about 60%. I mean, people the public writ large doesn't have a favorable view of that methodology. But what we have is a minority of the public, which, because of the way our legislature is made up, is disproportionately influential through primaries to elect people who are responsive to that base. And it's true on both sides, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, there's all, I mean, any Democratic legislature can tell you they hear from the progressive base of their party all the time, like, why aren't you blah, 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 right? Same thing. But it's just like, because of where we're at right now, the majority is sort of beholden to these more conservative element than the general population. I mean, Arizona's a conservative place, but it's not like that conservative writ large.
All right, questions before we move into discussing water. Mary Ann?
Yeah, I have a question. One of the bills that looks like has turned back into the weeds requires the school board elections being partisan. I'm just curious, statewide, are there any partisan school board elections, or are they all nonpartisan?
All school board elections, excuse me, are nonpartisan, and that's true in every state in the country except for 2. So it's a long-standing sort of national thing that partisan school board elections are a bad idea. And you know, same with we agree, and we think that also like city council and things like that, because you know, if you put a school board race through a partisan primary system, given what we just talked about, like, good night. You're getting mailers in your mailbox with Trump on them and Nancy Pelosi in there and all kinds of stuff. Like, did you know so-and-so's a socialist and they're running for school board? I mean, there's enough of that already. But, like, or did you know that, you know, this person, you know, gave money to Donald Trump, you know, whatever. Like, if you tie in school board races to that sort of political machine in an overt way, I mean, you'll fundamentally alter the governance of school districts in the state. Like, it would be bad news. And so that's why we oppose it. And most states do as well.
I'm going to ask for, Chris, could you stay on a little bit? Because I'd like to go to our water discussion, because Terry might have another conflict, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think a whole bunch of us have more conversations we want to have. And so thank you so much, Chris. We'll ask
Terry Goddard, ladies and gentlemen, water and law guru.
I'm going to turn it over to Judy Moore, who's heading our water issues, and she's going to introduce Terry and the water issues program. So, Judy?
Terry Goddard is president of the Central Arizona Water Conservation District. Terry was elected to his second full term on this board on November 6th of 2018 to represent Maricopa County, all the way until the end of December of 2024. Terry Goddard also previously served as a member of the CAWCD board from 2001 through 2002. He's currently serving as board president and previously served one term as board vice president. Terry is an attorney with the Goddard Law Office. He served as mayor of Phoenix from 1984 to 1990 and was the Arizona Attorney General from 2003 to 2011. Mr. Goddard earned a BA from Harvard and a law degree from Arizona State University. Terry, we're inviting Terry to talk to us about water. We'd like to know what you do and what Central Arizona Water Conservation District is. And maybe if we get a chance, tell us about what bills might be coming through.
Thank you to, let me get this right, to the league for so much good work. And as usual, I've underestimated the incredible capacity of the Arizona League of Women Voters and didn't produce enough handouts for this group. So my apologies, I did it personally, that's why the inside is upside down. Not good on handouts. But if you all would be kind enough to share, and I've turned the draft over so that I believe it can be circulated within this group. But I will try to paint a picture that is represented by the maps in this particular handout. So you don't have to have it. So those of you on this side of the room, please rest easy. It's not critical, but it does have some convenient follow-up information. How many have heard of the CAWCD? There we go. Obviously knowledgeable group, but it's perhaps one of the least known acronyms in Arizona or anywhere else for that matter. We have an elected board of 15. They are elected 10 from Maricopa County, 4 from Pima, 1 from Pinal. Those are the 3 districts that are combined to receive water from one of the longest human canals in the world. The CAP Canal starts in Parker, ends up in Tucson. It's a total of 336 miles, bringing critical water, renewable water, into the central part of Arizona. That's the bullet point description, but as you might imagine, especially from seeing the headlines recently, there's a lot more to that story. Let me start with where our water comes from. We had a wet summer, and I think many people felt, hey, the drought is over. We've been in a 30-year drought and it must have broken. No, it did not. I hate to be that. The water in the Colorado River comes from the Rockies. So what we all have to do collectively is pray for snow. Because that's where our supply comes. If there's a bad ski season in anywhere in the area just west of Denver, we're not going to get what we need here in central Arizona. It flows out of the Rocky Mountains down to the Colorado River. There are a number of tributaries. I won't go through the whole map, but it ends up in Lake Powell, which is a major water repository, and then goes through the Grand Canyon, ends up in Lake Mead. And Lake Mead is what I'm going to be talking about mostly. That's where the lower basin gets its water. Now let me define that term. The Colorado River goes through 7 states. The upper basin is Colorado primarily, but also New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. So that's the top part. And the bottom part is our immediate neighbors, Nevada and California, and Arizona. Those are the 3 lower basin states. Now, I'm a big believer in long-range planning, and I think one of the things that we've had to benefit all of us that live in the Rocky Mountain West is an awareness. This started with John Wesley Powell, as you probably know, and the one-armed man went through the Colorado and did the original survey of much of the West. He basically said, this is arid country. It's only going to survive and thrive if we carefully monitor the water that is brought to farmers in the cities and the other folks in these areas. So in 1922, the 7 basin states that I mentioned got together in Santa Fe. And their purpose was to divide up legally the long-term consequences of the water from the Colorado. And they did that. It was a long session. It was, I'm sure, acrimonious, because water's always acrimonious. You know the story, of course. In the West, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And having been involved most of my life in some form of the water wars, I can say that is so true. It is the real lifeblood of our state and of the western part of this country. They divided the river as follows: 7.5 million acre feet. An acre foot, everybody knows what an acre foot is? It's a convenient way to talk about a lot of water. An acre foot is approximately 333,000 gallons. Put another way, it's about what 3 average families use in a year. But it is essentially an entire acre of land filled 1 foot deep. And so everything I'm going to be talking about today is not in gallons, not in anything anybody can understand. It's going to be in acre feet. So you can do the juxtaposition in your head. So 7.5 million for the upper basin, 7.5 for the lower basin. That sounded like an equitable arrangement. And then later in the 40s, a treaty was entered with the country of Mexico, and 1.5 million acre feet went to Mexico. So do the quick math. Obviously, 7.5 is 15, and another 1.5 million is 16.5 million acre feet. Very nice, very apparently appropriate. Everybody left Santa Fe happy. Only one problem. That year, 1922, and the period immediately before it, was one of the heavier runoff years in geological history. I'm not just talking recorded history, I'm going back through tree ring data into the early periods. And so we divided up a river that wasn't there. And you've heard a lot recently, especially in the recent newspaper stories about our drought, that we are cutting back because we've got such a serious, newly emerging, climate change related problem on the Colorado River. That's part of the problem, but it's not the whole problem. The original problem was way too much water was anticipated and it just wasn't there. Instead of 16.5 million acre feet, they figured it would be at least 20. That was the thinking in Santa Fe. It's been closer, and it goes up and down fairly dramatically, but it's been closer to 13 or 14 million acre feet. So you can see, we already had a deficit. Now the only reason we got as far as we've gotten, without a drought being declared on the river, is that the upper basin, the 7.5 million that they were supposed to, thought that they were entitled to take, has not happened. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is Lake Powell is their major supply lake. Have you been to Lake Powell? Tell me how you get water out of Lake Powell. There's nothing but mountains on either side of it. The answer is correct, you don't. Lake Mead is in the middle of Las Vegas, and Nevada's supply and everything downstream is relatively accessible. But the upper basin has a tougher assignment. So what has been used in the upper basin has been closer to 3 to 4 million, not 7.5. The lower basin has immediately grabbed everything it could get. California was allocated 4.4 million acre feet as their part of the 7.5 coming to the lower basin. Very quickly, they started using 5, even as much as 6 million acre feet, because not only was the upper basin not taking their full allocation, Arizona was taking out of the 2.8 million that we were allocated in the Colorado Compact, we were taking maybe 1 million. And you know where it came from. I mean, there are lots of farms in the Yuma area, the Welton Mohawk Irrigation District, and the on-river supplies that up in Mojave County and La Paz County. There's some substantial agriculture. And that's pretty much where the Arizona supply went. And so 1.5 million acre feet every year, that was our allocation based upon the law of the river, went downstream. And California grabbed most of it. Well, actually through the 30s, 40s, and 50s, there was a rallying cry here in Arizona. It was, we have to get a way to get our allocation out of the river. And that's going to involve a whole lot of canal building and a whole lot of pumping. Because central Arizona, as you undoubtedly know, is about 1,000 feet above the Colorado River. So to get to Phoenix and then ultimately to Tucson, there's a huge lift involved. So we went through legislative work. There was a little Supreme Court case in there that determined for sure how much Arizona was entitled to, but the bottom line was, in 1968, President Johnson signed the bill that allocated funding for the Central Arizona Project. Now, we didn't get there easily, because at that stage, we had, I think, 4 members of Congress, and California had, I'm rounding here, but you get the idea, about 44 members of Congress. California was not happy that the surplus that they had been banking, they had been using, was now going to go, or part of it was going to go to Arizona. So they opposed every step of this effort. We had some very important assets, and you, being involved in politics, probably could tell me what those assets were. First was a guy named Carl Hayden. Carl started in the United States Senate in the 20s. Not quite at statehood, but very close to it. He was, without doubt, the senior and most powerful member of the United States Senate in 1968. He was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and he was president pro tem. Doesn't get any better than that, except we had 2 members of the House of Representatives in those days One was Boris K. Udall, and the other was John Rhodes, a Republican and a Democrat. And I would lay dollars to donuts that it was the brightest combination of legislative leadership any state has had in that Congress. And those two, along with Senator Hayden and eventually Barry Goldwater, were able to move the legislation against California opposition. The one price they had to pay, and this becomes very important, is that they took the lowest priority of the river in exchange for the funding of the Central Arizona Project. So everybody else gets their water before the 1.5 million acre feet that come to the middle of the state. Now, I'm sorry, I've spent a lot of time laying the groundwork, but hopefully that's maybe something you didn't know, but it is critical to where we are today. Since 1985, we have been receiving our full allocation in Central Arizona. That's a little better than 1.5 million acre feet. It's been 1.6, a little bit more. And what hasn't been used, consumptively used is the legal term, has been put underground. We have banked about 10 million acre feet, a lot of water, by letting it trickle back into the underground aquifers. We've also passed the most aggressive and I think the best groundwater management statute in the country. The Arizona Groundwater Management that requires a 100-year supply for any new development outside of the cities is a model in this country. You probably know that a few years ago California had a water crisis, and all of a sudden they figured, wow, maybe we should do what Arizona did back in the 1970s. And they actually hired Bruce Gabbard, who was the governor that got it through in the 70s, to come and sit in a windowless office in Sacramento and try to help California get out of the mess that they were in terms of the allocation of groundwater. Now, the CAP is not groundwater. The CAP is replenishable surface water from the Colorado River. But here in Central Arizona, we need both, and we use both in approximately equal amounts. The groundwater that comes through the tap at your houses is about, some of it is from Salt River Project, depending on where you live, but those in Central Arizona, that's about a third. About a third from the CAP and about a third from groundwater. And that's the critical dynamic that has allowed Arizona to grow so dramatically in the past 40 years, has been we had a secure water supply. Well, we always knew that that could come to an end. We always knew we were the lowest priority on the river, and we could have a legal call eventually that would begin to slow down, could even stop the importations into Central Arizona. And for years that didn't happen, and there was a little sleight of hand that was involved. I mentioned that there was extra water going down to Lake Mead and then on to us, which wasn't used in the upper basin. But that began to get more and more dicey as we got into the middle of this last decade. And we saw Lake Mead, which was the critical reservoir, coming down and down and down. And there's a magic level, and we talk way too much in this game about acronyms and about levels of water above sea level. 1075 was the magic number. When Lake Mead hit 1075, 1,075 feet above sea level, the Secretary of Interior is empowered to implement what he called, under our rules of the river, a Tier 1 shortage. Well, we in Arizona kind of saw that coming. So in the last several years, CAP and the Department of Water Resources and a number of major water users have just been not taking as much as they could have. So for a long time, we were in what we called a Tier 0 situation. 192,000 acre feet was left in Lake Mead. And that was done very quietly. You probably didn't know about it. It wasn't a headline. But what it meant was that the shortage, when it was going to be declared, kept getting put off. And believe me, we got down to inches. That 1075 plus 6 inches one year. And just a very, very tiny extra. But finally, as you say, that we had to pay the piper. This last August, which is when the projections are made, the Secretary of Interior finally had the undeniable projection that in the next year, the level of the lake would be below 75. And it wasn't close. It was going to be way below. Let me tell you one of the reasons. We've had climate change in the world. And one of the impacts of climate change has been the forests, the area that I talked about in the Rocky Mountains, have gotten significantly warmer. It means the ground is drier. And so when you have a normal snowfall, we found that the actual runoff is much lower than it used to be because so much of the runoff goes directly into the ground to replenish what was lost because of the higher temperatures. So last year, somewhat to our surprise, the flow into Lake Powell, the critical flow of the Colorado River Basin, was the second lowest in history. Since they started filling the lake last year, although it wasn't a terrible year in terms of snowpack, it ended up being a terrible year in terms of runoff. So we saw this coming, and the Secretary made the allocation in the statement in August, which was predicted, and that meant the following. We were getting 1.5 million acre feet. Now 512,000 acre feet less was going to come in 2022 into the state of Arizona. Now that sounds pretty awful, and it is. It's 1/3 of the total supply of renewable water that was coming into the state. But we already had an allocation program in place, which everybody understood, which basically allocated to various users in priority order. And so you have within our system very high priority water, that's the cities and towns, the municipal uses, industrial uses, and tribal uses, because the tribal largely has been through litigation. And so the last user on the list is agriculture. And so the major hit was the farmers in central Arizona, Pinal County and parts of western Maricopa County. They are in not an immediate loss. They've got some temporary water that we've been able to find for them that will get them through this year. But after that, they have to either go on the pump for their additional water, or they have to go out of business. In other words, we're not going to be able to do the same massive production of cotton and alfalfa and some of the other crops that have been very dominant in central Arizona and even on the river. So things are changing, but they're not changing on the tap. In other words, you're not going to see a reduction. It's not going to be slower in the immediate future. But what I hope I can make clear is our mindset has to change. We're in a desert. We're not going to be able to have a future that involves unlimited use of water. I was talking to a group of realtors the other day in Scottsdale, and somebody asked me about the future, and I said, well, I really don't think anybody should be plotting any more cities that have a big fountain in the middle of town. And apparently I had some investors in Fountain Hills in the audience, and they did not like that. But come on, folks, we need to have at least a rule of reason. It's like the first rule of holes. When you're in one, stop digging. We in Arizona have to stop wasting water. And that has some pretty profound consequences. Right now, Tucson uses 90 plus, about 95 gallons of water per person per day. Anybody know what it is in Maricopa County? It's over 200. So there's things to give. There definitely are. It's not all low-flow toilets and shower heads that don't actually drip. It's municipal water supplies that leak all over the desert. It's golf courses. Frankly, I think we have probably tenured our last, even with renewable. Here's a trick. If you start criticizing golf courses, and I'm not a golfer, so I feel free to do so, there's a lot of pushback because all golf courses that have been certified in central Arizona use reclaimed water. Not the original ones, they're grandfathered, but the new ones all do. And they say, oh, that's great. Well, folks, reclaimed water is water. And in the immediate future, we're going to need to look at all water supplies equally. And there's a lot of bad jokes about exactly what it is we might be drinking. But purification processes are such that we shouldn't have bad jokes. We need gray water. We need, frankly, to use shower water, for example, for the plants in your yard. Right now, we don't have the legal ability to do that, but I think that's the kind of thing that we need to be thinking about. So you're talking about legislation. There are a lot of places where I believe on the margins we can make significant improvements, not to change our economy, not to change much of the way we live, but let's just think about reducing the size of our front lawn. Let's think about what is in fact desert landscaping and start moving in that direction, because our household usage is 60% plus out of doors. It's not what you need for showers and to wash the dishes. It's the ornamental, it's the lawns. I love my lawn, but I think I'm prepared. My wife has been working on this for years, and now I think I'm ready to give up, at least most of it. Maybe a little accent there in the middle. I hate artificial turf, but we're going to see a lot more of it in the future. We're going to see a lot of very practical reasons. And let me tell you who the model is.
California.
And I'm surprised to have to say this. It's Las Vegas. Las Vegas has done the most amazing job of individual housing conservation. When I mentioned we got 2.8 million acre feet out of the Colorado, guess how much Nevada gets? 400,000. In other words, nobody lived in Las Vegas back in 1922, so they didn't get much. And they turn a fair amount back, because those casinos may seem to be water wasters, they recycle it over and over and over again. It is a major model, and we can learn a lot from them. And then we're going to have to look for new supplies, because we're not at the end of this drought. We're not certainly at the end of climate change. And we've got a lot of, we could drop, I guess the point is we could drop even lower. We went through a exercise in this last year we called the 500 plus plan, because Arizona gave up 512,000 acre feet. That's water we didn't take off the river. That's water arguably that stayed in Lake Mead. And then we found out the river, the lake was still dropping. So last fall, everybody in the state got together and voluntarily put another 500,000 acre feet a year into the lake. In other words, we reduced, not by 512,000, by 1 million acre feet, we reduced the Arizona demands on the lake. That's good, but we're still not sure that we've stopped the erosion, stopped the lake falling away. So there could be a tier 2. There could be a tier 2A and B. There could be even a tier 3 in the future. And we're going to, I think, recognize as a state that that's going to be important. Now, all of a sudden, water's on everybody's mind. When we get to Penny's essential point. This legislature has already got a number of water-related bills. And I'd like to say I'm in favor of every one of them. That's not entirely true, because the details are still very smudged. We haven't gotten deeply into exactly what is meant. But I think here's the thing, and the senator can correct me on this, but I think there's a very strong bipartisan effort to say we want to do something to curb the loss of water in Central Arizona. Is that basically fair? It is, I think it's a good thing. The governor said he wanted to put $1 billion into it. Now, it was a little bit deceptive in that it was $1 billion over 3 years, and Governor Ducey's only going to be here for this year. So the next 2 years, somebody else has got to take care of that. And he left the impression, although it wasn't specific, that it was for a major desalting program. Now, the only place we can do desalting is in the Gulf of Baja California. That's in another country, you know that. That does add a lot of extra complications. And so I'm an advocate for staying closer to home. One of them is, you probably heard about, and this will also be in the legislature, they're talking about raising Salt River, is talking about raising Bartlett Dam. Right now, floodwater goes through Bartlett Dam every year. They believe with a higher, because it's a long story, but the dams upstream have been silted up, so they're not holding as much water as they used to. We could save in the system as much as 100,000 acre feet a year by raising the level of Bartlett. I think it's a great idea. There's some other things that cities could do to find additional water through reclamation of wastewater, and they need to do it. And I think the legislature could be very helpful in helping to prime the pump, literally, figuratively speaking, to make that happen. And we're looking outside of the state, but frankly, I'm not holding my breath on that. We are working at CAP with, and this is hard for me to say, because I grew up in an era where California was the personification of all the folks that wanted to take away our water. And so to say that I grew up hating California is...
Only Southern California.
Only Southern California. Yes, that's true. You can't get it to Northern California. That's an important point, but San Diego and Los Angeles were always the bad guys in my early developing. Well, now, right now, we're working jointly with the municipal, with the water system in Los Angeles, because they dump 200,000 plus acre feet a year into the Gulf. They treat it and put it in the ocean. If they could reclaim that water, then that's 200,000 acre feet they wouldn't take off the Colorado. If we help them pay for it, we could claim that Colorado River water. That could be as much as another 200,000 acre feet. That's a big deal. But it involves what I was talking about before. It means LA will be taking the leadership role in trying to make sure that they don't waste any water. In other words, there's no such thing as wastewater anymore. It's all water, it's all valuable, and we need to use it as many times as we possibly can. We're in a desert. So that's my bottom line. You're going to see a number of bills. Most of them are money bills. And again, we are in an emergency. This is the time to make major investments in what happens in the next. I mean, Governor Ducey said his $1 billion would take care of us for the next 100 years. I'm not here to debate the governor, but that's silly. The desaling plant that he's talking about costs $5 billion, basically, assuming we can get the agreement in Mexico, assuming that it's not an environmental catastrophe. Both of those are big assumptions. You know, that's not going to pay for it. Our joint venture with Met in California, probably $3 to $4 billion to get 200,000 acre feet, which doesn't solve our problem. It just helps to reduce it. So we've got a long way to go. But I think the bottom line, if I can just leave you with this, is we as Arizonans have an obligation, all of us, to be as respectful of water as we possibly can. And the fact that the emergency is not on our doorstep today should not blind you to the fact that it's out there, and eventually, if we don't change our ways and be much more frugal, we are going to have some catastrophic cutbacks. So let's not do that. Let's try to be what Arizona has always been, which is very forward-looking in the way we handle our resources. Starting the Salt River Project in 1912, it was the first big reclamation project in the United States. CAP was the next one 50 years later, and frankly, set a standard for many other parts of the country. It's time for us to take a deep breath and do another major effort. And it might be lots of individual efforts, like Bartlett Dam, to get through this particular crisis. Penny's up. I need to stop talking.
Well, Terry, the first thing is Democracy House is in trouble. We have a huge lawn.
You're upstream.
Oh my God, we have a huge lawn and we host a lot of events, and Terry has been at many events after this event. On the a little smaller, I have to go back and tell my husband, okay, time to get a turf.
We'll come dig it up.
Okay, we'll come dig it up, okay, great. On the very dry subject of water, we were enthused, weren't we?
Yes.
I mean, I think Terry, before I open it up to questions, I just want Terry to tell us, he is second generation serving on this board. Tell us that.
Now, for a while, my father and I were on the board together, which was a blessing. And now I'm going through many of his papers and turning them over to CAP because he kept things that the board didn't keep. So I'm now the repository of the history of water in Central Arizona, which is fun. I've enjoyed that. But I'd be delighted to take questions, and I was promised one quick word about my other passion, which is to get dark money. And I know the league is our most important supporter. You individually and collectively have done more than any other group to help make this happen. And I'm very optimistic that this year we can do it because of Ripco Knox and because of a number of other league members who have just, we've got a pecking order, believe it or not. Cindy Hahn is part of the keeper of this. We know who our best petition signature gatherers are, and a lot of league members are right there in the top 20, so thank you for that. However, if you don't have a petition, I brought a bunch of them. And here's the thing, there's no legal requirement to get all 15 names filled in. We're happy right now if you can get 4, 5, 6 good ones and get it back to us notarized. That would be very helpful. So even if you think you don't have the capacity to do 15, please take a petition. And I've got quite a few over here that I would hope you would grab one, keep it with you. The deadline is the 7th of July. We still have some time. And we're narrowing it up. We have 200,000 signatures in hand today. We need at least 300. So I've got another 100,000 that we need to get. I think it's well within our capacity. We've been getting some good numbers recently, but I take nothing for granted. This is my 3rd rodeo. And my last. I'm not doing this again. So we've got to get on this time, and with your help, we will do it. Thank you.
Terry, before you go away, Senator D'Alessandro is in the room. I'd like her to come up, please, and let you know. The senator is a lead member of Redistricting.
The senator is also one of our top 20 signature gatherers. I'm doubly in her case.
I have to tell you, this is my last term because I've been redistricted out. And my successor will probably be Gail Griffin, who I've been fighting for 10 years. And I didn't get emotional about it until I saw with Betty and so many others of you. And I'm thinking I have some signed notarized petitions in the car. I'm not afraid we're going to be here. But thank you so much. I'm also the Arizona House Democrat. I'm a senator to most people, though, you know. But on the reconsultation committee, and so they've been working really hard, Cap and the water department, to look at golf courses, look at all the technical stuff, and so we'll be. And I'm also very active in Council of State Governments, and I went to one trip since the COVID. I went to Colorado Springs because they had a Colorado River Forum that I attended representing Arizona with Senator Kerr, who's the other person on the reconsultation. And they're actually going to come to Arizona. The upper and lower basin states are going to come. And I know that Terry Goddard is going to help get a tour for CAP because it's a amazing tour and what they do, even though the CAP water stops 10 miles north of my home in Sawanita. So enjoy your day, and thank you so much. Very, very thank you.
Can you entertain some questions? Lunch is here. If you have yeah, so what we can do is if you want to get lunch, Terry, I don't know, what is your calendar?
Well, I do have to run in a few minutes, but I'd be delighted to take questions, and I'll try to be short. Yes.
Hi, Linda Maley. I've worked on Dark Money for
Thank you.
3 times. Yay. But I'm a native of Arizona, but I spent a good many years in Colorado, and I still have good friends and family there. And I know that Denver, which is just west of the headwaters of the Colorado River, has water restrictions. And my friends are always saying, how come we have water restrictions? You live in the desert down the river and you don't have water restrictions in the desert. So are you entertaining the possibility of water restrictions?
Great question. The short answer is I'm not, because at the CAP we provide wholesale water to the cities.
Okay.
So this ultimately becomes a city obligation. And let me share a personal gripe. Until a few years ago, if you called the water department about your bill in the city of Phoenix, you got a recorded announcement while you were waiting, 10, 15 minutes to get somebody to help you. And the recorded announcement said we have the lowest water rates of any major city in the country. And I thought, A, that should not be true.
Right.
And if it was, you should not talk about it.
Right.
And so I say that just not to pick on Phoenix, but I
Right.
think cities have an obligation to be part of the chorus that says we're going to, and time and again, we have found that the cost of water is the major thing that stimulates conservation. So I hate to be the one that says you really should be charging more, but they really should be charging more.
Yes,
Right
exactly.
now, the unfortunate thing about water in the West is it's considered free. CAP by law can only charge you the transportation costs. We can't charge you what the water is actually worth to the customer. And I think that's gonna be a change in thinking that we're gonna see in the future, but it's not gonna happen overnight. Yes, ma'am, back.
Just a quick question in regards to development. There was a big article in the paper recently about a huge development out just past Awatuki, I guess, that they're thinking of. I don't know how many millions of homes.
Oh dear.
And there's no water going to this area either. It was not a farm area. And it just blows me away that they're even discussing anything like this.
Yes. Let me go back to my respect for the groundwater code. We require anybody who's not in a major city who wants to develop to provide a 100-year supply, proof that they have 100 years of water for the demand that they are about to create. That's a very good move. There have a few ways that people have figured out to get around that.
They weren't discussing that one.
And some of these development proposals, frankly, are pie in the sky, they'll never happen. But there's some very, very real ones that probably shouldn't happen. They're not in the city, they're out in the desert, they're not converting farmland. I mean, one of the things that many developers say, and they're right, is that converting farmland to housing is a net savings of water. It is. Houses use less than cotton on an annual basis, by a lot. But when you're talking about desert land being turned into houses, that's not a net savings. And we have to look at it very carefully. It's back to my rule of holes. We're in a water shortage. You don't create additional demands if you don't know exactly where their future supply is coming from, because otherwise you and I are their future supply. And we just can't do that. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Candy Coronado from the West Valley. I've been sending emails to my federal and state elected officials asking why couldn't we consider a water pipeline from, say, Louisiana, Mississippi, the places that are always flooding. Why don't we do a water pipeline from them to us? We'll take the water.
Well, Senator Gonzalez, there actually was a resolution passed last year by the state legislature saying that we should get the floodwaters of the Missouri and move them into Arizona. Let me put it this way, it took 50 years to get the Central Arizona project approved in Congress, and that's all in one state. As soon as you cross state boundaries, you create almost inevitable consequences. Penny refusing my dad, who was very involved in water policy for many years, he testified in Congress in favor of the Central Arizona project, and he was the only state official in that period that was testifying. All the others were federal. So there's a sort of unwritten law that they are very respectful for other congressmen, senators, and agency heads. That law does not apply to state officials. So the poor governor of Arizona sat up there, and Senator, I'll never forget it, Congressman Saylor from Pennsylvania, who hated the Central Arizona project, proceeded to ask him in a course of, I've got the congressional record, nobody's going to want to see it, but he spent 2 to 3 hours grilling my dad about every river basin in the country and whether or not Arizona wanted to import water from that basin. The only one he kind of hesitated on, and he was being advised by the best. I mean, Stu Udall was literally right behind him during this testimony, and Stu would say, no, we're not going to do that. The one Dad did, in fact, hesitate on was the Columbia and the Willamette. 100 million acre feet a year go into the Pacific Ocean from those two rivers. We have taken that up. Scoop Jackson actually, who was in the Senate at that time, did a prohibition statute in the United States Congress to keep Arizona or anybody else from taking their so-called surplus water. People hold on to their water very dearly, and to move it between states is going to be very hard. Yeah.
Do you know what's funny about that? I worked for the Pennsylvania legislature for 32 years, so we've
So
got
you know
Sailor.
Saylor.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. He was the ranking minority member of the Council of Interior and Insular Affairs in 1996. 1966.
And we're going to take one last question, and then we're going to transition. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to get lunch. Terry, please get some lunch. And then we'll get a chance to also continue our conversation with Chris, okay?
We need Chris.
Yeah, we need Chris. We absolutely need Chris. before we go,
Let me
we
just
have
say one quick
last
word
question.
about education. Chris, I think, has talked about the nuances. There's a big picture here, and I'm sure he would agree that there's a substantial number of the Arizona legislature who simply don't like public education.
Right.
And what you see in part is a war of attrition. And all that he had to say about vouchers, all that we've seen in the past about the various ways that public education is being sapped, go back to one of my least favorite legislators, but frankly, I think one of the sharpest, a guy named Russell Pierce. You may remember. And Russell very candidly told me, and he made no bones about this, he said, I don't think the public should be educating children. I think they should be educated in the family, in the church, or in private schools. That was his sincere belief, and he was public about it. It was nothing secret. But I think that is an attitude that is really what we're talking about. Anyway, excuse me for digressing into your area.
Terry, before we get
one
on,
question.
yes.
We know what we have to do at the local level, and I've been an observer at the county, and just planning and zoning is nuts. What can we do there, if anything? Like the 303 corridor. There was nothing there 5 years ago.
Yeah, now it's built in. It's a great question. All politics is local. The people that ultimately are going to make the decisions about your and my conservation are going to be cities and counties. I was very heartened the other day because I mentioned Pinal County has been hit very hard by this 512,000 acre feet reduction. An awful lot of it, in fact, well over half, comes out of the Pinal County farming interest. So that's an economic hit. The mayor of Casa Grande gave a very interesting and I thought perceptive speech about what they're doing. They have now put water conservation into their general plan. So they don't approve a new subdivision. They don't approve an individual house unless they have evidence that it is a water miser. And he said Casa Grande was the first city in the state to do that. But please, if you're active with your city councils and your county officials, encourage them to make sure that there's a water conservation portion to the general plan. So that we're thinking ahead. We're not approving water wasting projects. We're not putting artificial lakes in any new developments. Please. We're not putting huge fountains in the middle of the desert where the water doesn't come down, it just evaporates. These are not sensible uses in a water short area. And a lot of it is common sense. A lot of it is, you don't absolutely have to turn the tap off when you're brushing your teeth, but it's not a bad idea. And all of that has a collective impact that will keep us out of the next crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. We're going to stay on. We're going to do lunch and learn, another lunch and learn in reality. So thanks everybody. Go get your lunch, okay, and then we'll have our conversation with Chris. Terry, please get some lunch before you go, or take it with you if that works. Thank you, Abdi, for having us live. Thank you all. Let's keep going.